Hi, I'm John Knowles, software trainer for Adobe. In this video, I'll be talking about effects and transitions in Premiere Pro. Now, if you're coming to Premiere from Avid, you won't find the tools to be radically different from what you're used to, but there are a few key differences. Let me show you. All right, I've got my Premiere Pro project here. This is an ad. Place some of that back here. A lot of great shots. We need to add some effects and transitions now to the edit. Now I can reconfigure my workspace if I want to make this process a little bit smoother. There is a dedicated effects workspace here. If you go under Window Workspaces, you can choose Effects, and it sets it up like this, and it stacks some of the panels on the right-hand side like this. These are stacked panels, and they are soloed. So when you open one, it only opens that one, and when you open another one, that one opens and the other one closes. Kind of accordion style. That's called stacked, and you can just click on the hamburger menu, go to panel group settings, by the way, and that's where you select stacked panel group and whether they solo in the stack or not. In this case, I don't necessarily need this workspace. In fact, I'm going to go back to the basic editing workspace, and I just want to make sure a few key panels are open. I don't need the source monitor for this. I'm done cutting for now, so I'm just going to go to effects controls, which is going to be blank until I actually select something, and I'll pull this divider here to give myself a larger program monitor. I don't need that much space for effects controls. And down here in this panel, I'm going to choose effects. If you don't see that, you go under Window, Effects, choose it there. This is similar to the effects palette in Avid. So you'll see all of the audio effects, video effects, audio transitions, and video transitions in one place, as well as presets, and you can set your own favorites and put them in a dedicated folder. Now, one thing we don't have in Premiere Pro is the quick transition tool like we do in Avid. So we need to add transitions one of two ways. So I'm going to put a transition between these two shots here, where she's working out and then walking into the gym. I'll go to the effects palette over here, and I will twirl down video transitions, and I'll just do a quick dissolve here. I'll do a film dissolve. The one way I can get that onto the transition is just to grab it and pull it over and put it between the two clips like so. And there we are. We've got our film dissolve. I'll make that track a little bit taller and zoom in. All right, there's the transition right there. And notice when I click on it, it loads it up into the effects controls up here in the upper left. And I can see the A and B, the before and after. Normally that looks like this, A side, B side, but you can click this button to show actual sources, and it'll show you both of the real clips that are on the timeline here. And then you can change the start value and end value of that transition. So I could start at 50 instead of 0, for example. So it's already 50% on when the transition starts. Let's just take that back down to 0. And then you have a duration option up here at the top. That defaulted right now, it's at 106. I can make that really short, so 12 frames.
And I could get started.
Or I can make that really long. I can make that 2 seconds. And you'll notice on the timeline, the length of the dissolve is also changing here. Now there's a quick shortcut you can use to just change the duration without even going into effects controls. Just double click on the transition itself and you'll see a set duration option come up here. And that's where you can set that back to a different length. Now, there's also ways to reposition the transition. This is, again, very much like what you would see in the quick transition tool palette in Avid, but we're doing this here either on the timeline or in effects controls. If you want to reposition the transition so it's not perfectly straddling the cut point here, you can just grab it and pull it over. All right, this transition is starting early and then ending at the transition point, or I can pull it the other direction. It's going to start there. Or I can slide it so it's not perfectly centered there if I want to. And I can just hover with the mouse and you'll see this tool turns red and I can actually pull the edges of the transition out. That's another way to change the length, and there's a little pop-up below that tells me the new duration. Now, another way to change the positioning of the transition is up here in effects controls. You can just grab the transition right here. You can see the cut point, the playhead, and the transition is represented by the white box. Just grab it and pull to change the positioning, and you can also extend it in here if you want to change the length of it right here in Effects Controls. So different ways to alter transitions once they're already on the timeline. Now, if you want to change the transition to something else, you can either delete this one, just hit the delete key, or grab the other transition and drag it right on top and it will replace it. Now you can also do audio transitions the same way. There are a limited number of audio transitions. We just have crossfade options, constant gain, constant power, or exponential fade. And again, just pull them across, drag them on top of your audio tracks, and adjust accordingly up here in Effects Controls or down here on the timeline. You can also set a default transition and assign that to a keyboard shortcut. That way, every time you use the shortcut, it's going to apply the exact same transition each time. Let me show you how to set that up. So again, I'm going to apply a transition between these two shots. I can right-click on the edit point, and there's an option there to apply default transitions. And here we are. The default transition in this case is a cross dissolve. Delete that. Or I could have clicked on that edit point and used the keyboard shortcut. In my case, it's bound to Option T to get a default transition. You can also see that up here in the sequence menu with the edit point selected, apply default transition to selection. Over here, we can see which transitions are set up as the default transitions. You'll notice a blue highlight around these transitions here. For audio, we have a blue highlight around constant gain and a blue highlight around cross dissolve for the video transition. That highlight notes that this is the default transition when you apply that command. If you want to change that, so I'm going to change my default video transition to dip to black. I'm going to right click on that and I can set selected as default transition. And the next time I apply a default transition to something, it will be a dip to black. Same thing for audio. So if I want to change constant gain to constant power, set selected as default transition, and that is the new transition there. Now there's also a way to set the default length of these transitions. Up here in preferences, we're going to go down to timeline. And here at the top, you see that there are defaults for the video transition duration and the audio transition duration here at the top. And right now, those are both defaulting to 1 second each. Now they could be different. So I can do a 12 frame, whoops, that 8. I'm going to do a 12 frame video transition, and I still keep the audio transition at 1 second. I can also choose frames there if I want to. And if you're applying a default transition to a clip on the timeline that has linked video and audio, it will add it to both the video track and the audio track simultaneously. So here I have another sequence open, and these are two interviews back to back. I'm going to add the default transition between these two. There we go. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see indeed it did add that dip to black, which was 12 frames long, and the constant power default transition between these two audio clips here. And those are 1 second long, so it's longer. All right. So when you add that default transition to linked audio video, it's going to add it on both sides, unless you hold down the Option key. Let me take these out real quick. If you hold down the Option key again, you're only going to get the video side or the audio side when you click, and then default transition will only apply video or audio as you select it. Now with effects, you add them much in the same way you add transitions. I want to add some effects to this shot right here. It's a little dark. So I'm going to use the basic brightness and contrast effect to try to brighten this up a little bit. Now, over here in the effects panel, I can search for that effect here. If I twirl down video effects, I can just kind of look for it. If I know where it happens to be, it's in color correction. Spoiler alert. I can just grab it right there. Or if I know what effect I'm looking for and I don't actually want to open all of these folders, what I can do is simply search for the effect right here in this panel. I'll just start typing bright, and there it is, brightness and contrast. I just grab the effect and pull it and drop it on top of the clip. And up here, effects controls in Premiere Pro function much the same way as the effects editor in Avid. There is the brightness and contrast effect that we added to that clip. If you select another clip, you won't see it. Click back on it right there, and I can just now start adjusting the brightness, turn it way up, but then add some contrast back into it to give it some definition. Now I can quickly A/B it and see what it looked like beforehand by turning off the eyeball and turning it back on again. And I can stack other effects underneath it to keep adding to this color correction effect that I'm trying to get. Now in Avid, if you try to add a second effect to a clip just by dragging and dropping, it replaces the first clip unless you use the auto nest feature to double up and have two effects on the same clip. In Premiere, you don't have to do that. You drag another effect onto the clip, it just adds it right below. So I'm going to add the levels effect. I'm going to type in levels, there it is, and I'm just going to drag it onto the clip like so, and there it is, levels pops up right below brightness and contrast. It does not replace it. And there where I can affect some of the gamma options in here, brighten some of this up, darken some of the shadows, and play around with it like so. Now, if you don't like an effect, you want to get rid of it, no problem. Just click on the name and hit the delete key, and it goes away. I'm going to go and add a tint effect to it really quick here. Now, a quick tip, you don't always have to drag and drop onto the clip on the timeline. Sometimes the shortest distance is actually to the effects controls panel itself, and you can take the effect and just drag it right into the panel. So this clip is highlighted on my timeline, and I'm going to take tint and just drag it like so, puts it onto the clip right there in the effects controls. And you can stack these in different orders if you want. Just grab it and pull it, and the stacking order does influence how the clip looks a lot of the time. In this case with the tint, what I'm hoping to do is map the white to kind of an orange color like so, and just reduce the power of that a little bit. I'm trying to match a little more of this bright kind of sunny tone that's coming through here on the shot that it's cutting to. Again, I can A/B that really quickly, turn those off. That's where we were. And now that's back on. So I have both of those effects stacked on this clip right here. Now, if I want to add these same effects to another clip, there's a few different ways I can do it. I can select both those effects by holding down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows. Right click and just copy and go to another clip and hit paste. And it will add those two effects to the other clip. There we are. Not as strong as an effect here. That orange tint kind of dulled the blue in the shot here. I'll turn that up a lot. There we go. Now we can really see it. Now there's a way to add an effect to multiple clips at the same time. Once you get the effect set up the way you want it on one clip, you can apply the same effect to multiple clips in one shot. Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to go back to our clip here. I'm going to remove that brightness and contrast option and reset the tint to that, which will turn it black and white. It's going to give me a very basic black and white effect. I'm just going to hit copy or Command C or Control C on Windows. That's it, just basic copy. And then down here on the timeline, I'm going to select a bunch of other clips here at the end like so. And I'm going to right click and choose paste attributes. Now, most of the things you can select in effects controls are considered to be an attribute. Anything under the motion tab, the opacity setting, even the time remapping is an attribute. And you also see that effects are listed here. Here's that tint effect we copied from that clip. I'm going to turn off motion up here because I don't want to paste any of the motion keyframes or motion changes, and just paste that tint effect to those clips. And you can see if I scrub through, indeed, all of them have been turned black and white. And by double checking on one of the clips, I can see, yep, there is the tint right there. And the opposite of pasting attributes is removing attributes. So if you don't like that effect or want to swap it out later, select the same clips there, right click, and you can remove attributes. And in this case, let's remove, again, turn off the things you don't want to affect. And here we're just going to remove the tint. And now that black and white effect is gone. Now in Avid, you can use auto nesting to apply one instance of an effect to multiple clips at the same time, and that gives you just one place to change the effect, and it will change it for the entire timeline that's affected by that auto nest. We don't have the same thing in Premiere Pro, but let me show you a workaround. So I want to apply the tint effect to the entire timeline, and I don't want to paste attributes on individual clips, because what if I change my mind and want to change the intensity of that tint effect later or add something to it? I'll have to alter it individually on all of the clips or remove all the effects and then paste new attributes to it, which can get kind of tedious. So in this case, it's a good use for an adjustment layer. I'll go back to the project panel here, click on the new item menu, and bring up an adjustment layer. The default matches your open sequence here, which is 1080 at 23976 square pixels. That sounds great. Now, it does not automatically add the adjustment layer to your sequence. You still have to drag it over like so. And I'll pull out the end of it so that it fills the entire length of my sequence here. And now I will find that tint effect, which was on this clip here. I'll just select that effect, copy it, and then I'm actually going to turn it off so that that clip is not affected twice. I'll go to the adjustment layer, and adjustment layers can hold effects just like any other clip here. And I'm going to paste the tint to the adjustment layer, and all of the clips below that adjustment layer are affected by that tint option. And if I go back and I want to change that tint option, let's say we don't want to map it to white, we want to map it to blue. Now the whole sequence is affected like so, and I'll just bring that down a little bit. There we go. Now we've got a nice blue tint on top of everything. So that's similar to auto nesting, where you can go to one place, change the effect, and it ripples through and changes it to everything, because the adjustment layer is just affecting everything below it. If you've ever used Photoshop, it works the same way, and it only works for things that are below it. If I drag a clip up above it, that clip is not going to be affected by the adjustment layer because it's on top. Now, before we wrap up here, let me show you a few more things you can do with effects in Premiere Pro. Go back to my timeline here, turn off the adjustment layer, and I want to add an effect to this clip. The shot has some blur already on the edges, but I want to intensify the effect and blur out everything except her eyes. So I'm going to start by going down here to Video Effects and Blur and Sharpen there. I already have it open for myself, and there is Gaussian Blur. It's a great blur effect. I'm going to drag that onto the clip, and I'm going to adjust the blurriness up to about there. One thing you'll notice with a lot of the effects, you'll see the option here to add a mask. That's what these symbols are below the effect name here. You can do it with an ellipse mask, a square, or freehand draw it yourself. Any of these will get you to where you want to go. You just decide, do you want to use a basic shape or draw a custom mask? If I choose an ellipse, there it is like so. It's on the program monitor. I can drag that around by putting my mouse in the middle of it. I get the hand tool and I can drag it around. And in this case, it's blurring what's inside the mask. I want to blur everything outside of the mask. There is a handy switch here to invert, like so. And I can then pull the mask over here to encompass her other eye, like this. And that's looking pretty good, but I want to feather the edges so that there isn't this hard seam where the effect stops and starts. So I can affect the mask feather over here and the effects controls and pull this out. And you can see the feathering is represented here by the dotted lines. I'm going to pull this out a little bit wider, like so. And I'll just click off of it and play it back. There's the effect right now. I can quickly turn that off, take a quick look at it. Very nice. So again, you can mask any of the effects in here just by using the mask tools. If I wanted to, I could have drawn that freehand. I'll just remove that ellipse and I'll choose the pen tool and I can draw a mask like this instead to give me a more custom shape. Again, I have to invert that and then feather it out. Now you can also track a mask in Premiere Pro. It's one of the few things you can use motion tracking for in Premiere Pro without having to go into After Effects. I want to make sure that that mask is always around her eyes. So I'm going to go back to the head of the clip here, and I will set my starting position for that custom mask that I just drew on her eyes like this. And we have some really basic tracking controls down here. Track one frame backward, one frame forward, track backward, track forward, and tracking method, which we can use to just set position, scale, rotation, or all three at the same time. In this case, I'm just going to click the track forward button. There we go. And if I'm just going to go back and step through it with my frame by frame shortcut, there we are. We can see the mask is tracking, so it's going to stay locked to her eyes. That did a good job there. And that makes sure that the mask stayed tracked to the part of the shot that I wanted it to stay tracked to. Again, masks are one of the few things you can use tracking tools on in Premiere Pro. If you want more advanced motion tracking, you need to send that shot into After Effects, do it in there, round trip it by dynamic linking back into Premiere Pro. So you'll see in effects controls as well, we have keyframes now for the mask path. As long as you see a stopwatch underneath the parameters of the effect, you can keyframe it. So it's another powerful part of our Premiere Pro toolkit here. And I can do something like this. I want to do a split screen with both of these people talking at the same time and do kind of a wipe between them to set up the split screen. So I'm going to extend her talking over the coach and then have her move aside. So I'm going to keyframe that really quickly. I have to pull her over, so I'm going to set a position keyframe there and go forward 12 frames and then pull her to the side, which will reveal the coach underneath. At the same time, I need to bring in the edge of that shot. I'm going to use the crop effect like this, drag it onto the shot, and I'll use my keyframes I've already set to kind of line everything up. Let me zoom in a little bit like so. And that's a crop from the right edge, so I'm going to click the stopwatch there. That's keyframe 1. And then I will jump to the second keyframe here and pull that right edge in. And let me just move the coach to his position. I'm not going to keyframe him. He's just going to be revealed. And let's take a look.
Yes, I did. I started out at University of Washington.
There we go. So you can use those types of keyframes on effects. As long as the stopwatch is listed, you can apply any keyframes you want and set up your own custom animations. So that's it for adding effects and transitions inside Premiere Pro. Hopefully you got a lot out of this lesson, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.